Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Scott Schilling Speaks. I'm your host, Scott Schilling. I'm going to talk to a number one best-selling author here today, specializes in intentional profits. Now, everybody can benefit from that. Dennis Hill, thanks for joining me here on Scott Schilling Speaks.
Glad to be here, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Now, you're also a number one best-selling author in the book series, the Brilliant Breakthroughs, volume 5. So, but let's get into what you talk about most is these intentional profits. How do you help people gain those intentional profits?
Well, I've been doing this a long time, and what I focus on is helping business owners view their companies holistically. Most business owners operate within their comfort zone. Sometimes it's product development, sometimes it's the sales and marketing, sometimes it's the finance side. But business owners today are on much too fast a treadmill to not be concerned about all of the circumstances around them. So we begin with looking at the income statement and understanding where costs are best managed, whether it's up in production and cost of goods or in the delivery down below and the support of that. Of course, there's a timeliness to this too, because everybody was pushed into that kind of evaluation over the last year and a half with the pandemic. And many small businesses, while agile, while flexible, didn't quite have the perspective to really make some of the determinations they had to make, right? Who's essential, who's not essential? How do we determine this? So for 40 years, I've been working with organizations and understanding how to integrate their processes from one stage to the other. And in so doing, how does that map into the financial statements? And so they have a grasp of the entire company from both a bean counter point of view and an operational point of view, and ultimately from a joyous point of view, right? Because that's why they went into business in the first place. They didn't go into business to be unhappy, they went into business to be happier. So
Yes, certainly.
yeah.
So how does that integration really help them in protecting profits? Or again, I love the term intentional profits. How does that integration really help them accomplish that?
Well, we begin with, again, looking at the financial statements, but from an operations point of view, we look at where the gaps are from, for example, from the time that you're going out looking for new prospects for your business, all the way through to delivering that first order. There are going to be gaps. You can go out and buy an integrated software package, whether it's a big ERP or accounting system, or it's just simply QuickBooks, right? You're going to find that when you put in new systems, you're also going to create new gaps. And what a lot of organizations do, they're like tectonic plates, right? There's a gap there. There might be an interface there, but it's not integrated. You see, it doesn't really flex. So what happens, just like tectonic plates, there's a friction that builds up. That's an expensive friction usually because you're maintaining two sides of that struggle. And ultimately, like tectonic plates that give away, at some point you get an earthquake, you get a ripple through the organization. And this can happen dozens, if not hundreds of times a day in an organization, all of that costing them money. So we practically start with an intentional analysis to identify the gaps.
Now, so then what are the recommendations once you find those gaps?
Integrate. It's all, for me, it's integration. I've made my entire career around making measurements and solving problems. And those problem solutions always involve finding an integration as opposed to continuing bridges, temporary stopgaps, and things like that, because you're going to have to replace it at some point. Right, one side or the other is going to be deprecated or become obsolete. You're going to have to repair this. Then you're going to have to repair that. Perfect example. We're on the precipice of upgrading to something called Windows 11, right? And Windows 11, like all previous Windows, going back to the original Windows 3 back in the 1980s, is fraught with peril. People will slowly adopt. Unless all of a sudden the company, Microsoft, decides we're going to just completely pull support for certain products, leaving you no choice but to upgrade. Well, they've taken an approach that Apple has taken for many years, and that's to actually render your hardware obsolete through an
Wow.
upgrade of their software. So if you read what's out there now on Windows 11, you're going to find that some computers that you might have bought as recently as 4 years ago will not run Windows 11.
Wow.
So there we go, right? Hardware, software. My software, I have to upgrade because the software I'm using is going to be deprecated or made obsolete if I don't move to 11, and 11 is going to force me to upgrade my hardware. And you get this kind of struggle. And we have lived with this since the birth of the PC, but that's the most apparent high touch example I can give you of where an integration makes sense, right? So if you can get a half a dozen years out of a nice piece of hardware with software like an iPad, I like my iPad. Even that at some point, you can't run modern iOS applications on
Right.
a first generation iPad. So, but you can plan for those upgrades. Those are acceptable, right? To some extent. What's not acceptable is when you do a software upgrade or you do a new process, right? I can give you a real process one. Supply chain. We're all living under this new pressure on supply chain. In fact, if you had anybody talking supply chain a year ago who wasn't involved in inventory control, they must have had some sort of crystal ball.
Exactly.
Right. But today, everybody understands supply chain because it's talked about in the media and it's talked about almost daily out of Washington and on the 24-hour news cycles. That's forcing small businesses, not just the large ones. What do the big enterprises do? They just go out and buy their own boats, right? But
Right.
little businesses can't do that. And so the small businesses that are out there, and there's 13 million of them right now in the United States, by definition, 13 million small businesses that are trying to adapt to modified supply chains. And some of them might even be logistics companies themselves. So either they adjust, they adapt, they modify their processes in response to what their customers want, or they're going to be out of business.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting when you're talking about the Windows 11. It took me back to XP, and all of a sudden I had I don't know whether it was my laptop, and I bought an all-in-one, and one worked on one but wouldn't work on the other. And it is amazing how, from a business standpoint, how cumbersome it got, in the different things that you had to do to just try to get work done, from that side. So I would imagine. So is that part of the workforce processes and things that you put in to helping improve that productivity?
Yes. Everything I focus on would be called the Internet of Things and People. I don't believe the two can be separated. And so what you hear a lot about today is technology focus, whether it's 5G or blockchain or distributed decentralized computing, edge computing. It all affects people. At some point, we are either adopters and users of the equipment and software, or we're gatherers of that information. And this really touches on quite dramatically the issue of data privacy, which has been an area of research and development of mine for 40 years. I mean, I was a pioneer in the area of computer security in the 80s and have continued that even to this day on a global scale, trying to help companies, organizations, HR associations, and so forth understand that the term computer users is no longer applicable. You are an information or data owner of the information that you have out there in the ether sphere, right, out on the internet and so forth, or you're a gatherer of that information. And of course, we know what big tech has done. They've really monopolized, not just monetized, but monopolized a lot of that information. I mean, 92% of our searches on the internet are done from one search engine, and they were not the first search engine.
No, I mean,
They were like number 28.
that's fascinating to think about, actually.
They did very well, but they are the gatherers of the information. And what we have always seen in computer technology, Scott, is that the law lags technology, always has. And so big tech has been able to get away with what they've gotten away with because of a lack of regulation and this implicit, you regulate yourselves laissez-faire attitude, which is normally fine, except now we're finding out that a lot of things that were private weren't private and have been mined in order to, almost in a Pavlovian way, condition us and sadly condition our children to this new era of keeping your face on the screen, keeping your face in the phone.
Yeah.
And it is a social dilemma, like the film that came out last year on Netflix. You know, I'm hoping people would have watched that, because these are truth sayers, founders from companies that became big tech, who are really the whistleblowers right now, saying, hey, there's a lot of analytics going on here that you don't know anything about, and it is being used back on you. In fact, your information, your patterns of behavior and so forth are being incorporated into these advanced AI-centric, artificial intelligence-centric algorithms that come back to get you to do more, right? That's the Pavlovian conditioning here. Yep. And once that happens, it's easy to manipulate. You know, you don't have to manipulate a lot. You only have to manipulate people a small percentage, a fraction of 1% either direction, and change the outcome of elections, change the outcomes of economies.
Yeah, it's interesting that you shared that, because I looked up something very obscure the other day. I don't even remember what it is right now. Certainly the first and only time I've ever looked it up. Like, gosh, I wish I could remember it. But all of us, you know, so I did a search, and then I looked in, or I went to a social media platform, and here I am, the second post is that product. And I've never looked it up before, nor did I really care to ever learn about it again. But it was following me. So amazing how that happens.
Well, and fortunately, for example, most people don't realize that Facebook, for example, has been doing facial tracking and storing that information for a decade. And now they're dropping that technology, largely because they can't really sell it without violating our privacy. And I think what's happening, and I know this for a fact, there are several bills that were making their way through congressional committees at the federal level. We had 3 alone going through Assembly and Senate here in the state of Wisconsin that that died at the time COVID hit, because well, the legislative calendars came to a close, right? They were immediately ended because of the crisis. Right. And so they either died in committee or they were held in abeyance in committee. But these are regulatory. These are going to come out and incorporate some of the things that we saw California enact about 2 years ago, called the California Consumer Protection Act or Privacy Act, which really says at some point you own the data. You as the individual own the data. Last year in May, the World Economic Forum came out with something called the Presidio Principles, which are basically a data owner's bill of rights. So you and I are data owners of our digital twins, our digital information, our personas. And these companies, whether it's big tech or small tech, it really doesn't matter. It could be an HR system or a payroll system in a business. Right? They are data gatherers, and that's where the regulatory is going to come from. Not this idea of people blindly checking check marks in order to get access to free software and then being mined for every single piece of personal data. It has to end, because we know that these companies don't have a conscience. People do, companies don't. And so somebody somewhere who might be less ethical than others will say, hey, that's okay, let's do that. And they've done that, right? They've turned that information back on us in order to what? Stimulate hyper-consumerism, keep our faces attached. Ultimately, it comes down to making and turning a buck.
I mean, absolutely fascinating on one side, tremendously scary on another, you know, from that side. Obviously, I love your expertise in this area, and you convey that. Let's share a little bit about your contribution to Brilliant Breakthroughs Volume 5. What do you want people to get out of it from your section and then the overall project?
I think, Scott, that's a really good question. A lot of small business owners dream, right? They have an idea, they get into it. Times have changed a lot, even in my lifetime. in how a business is formed, and the whether it's regulatory and compliance or truth in advertising, or whether or not they even need a website that's open to the world, right? I'm not selling anything to Pakistan or Tajikistan or Lebanon. I don't need worldwide access to my website. I just need local advertising, local presence, that sort of thing. So they take the dream, and what you find is a lot of business owners really learn about business through experience, the University of Hard Knocks. They complement that with a degree from Google University. And again, you've got Hard Knocks and this misconception that you can get everything you need off of a search engine. And I don't mean to mention one by name, but they are the largest. And so this idea of knowing more than what you know, right, and not knowing what you don't know really becomes a problem. So the Brilliant Breakthroughs for the Small Business Owner series has been successful because it addresses at an advisory level fresh ideas and perspectives that a small business owner can adopt. Now, they can experiment with it first, right? But the beautiful thing is, how many places do you see that offer books and then give them an app, and the app just continues to nickel and dime, nickel and dime, nickel and dime? We don't. The beauty of this is that the Brilliant Breakthroughs app, which is brilliantbizbook.com, they can get it there, is free. I mean, as far as I know, you don't even have to own the book. If you can download the app, you can engage with a little bit more than 30 of the authors over the 5 years that the book has been published. And every year it's a different volume. This year is volume 5. And I believe it's going to be the last volume in the series. I contributed to volume 4 by showing people how to improve productivity, integration. So this year I'm doing how to improve profitability, because both go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
And if we can get a business owner to realize that don't make a career out of being a software developer. If you're not in the software development business, find the right tools. You need experts to tell you that in the shortest period of time. You have direct access to those experts through the Small Business and Brilliant Breakthroughs program for no additional charge. That to me is amazing. And when you add up the years of experience of all the people that are previous authors, and some of them are lawyers and accountants and PhDs and so forth, it's almost a millennium. It's over 900 years of business experience. You can't put that on a single board of directors.
No, very true.
You couldn't afford it either. So,
well, that's the reality. Yeah, no, that's the reality. And I think what's so brilliant about Brilliant Breakthroughs is, as you say, it's a assembly of experts. Experience is a great teacher. It's just a very expensive teacher. Work on your strengths, outsource your weaknesses, and be able to do that. And with not only the book series, but the app and everything, like you say, being able to reach out to experts for free. Obviously, if there is a time where there's an exchange of value that's greater,
sure,
that's appropriate.
Yep.
Because it's been determined to be appropriate. But I mean, I think that I congratulate you on your contributions, because I think that it's what small business needs. Far too often, they're chief cook and bottle washer. They get, they end up doing every task every day, every time. And besides being energetically wrung out, they're knowledge base and technologically wrung out and everything else. So go to the people that have the knowledge, right?
Well, and it's not just knowledge. The distinction I've been drawing now that I've been in this process for 2 years with Maggie is that there's knowledge, and we all look at books mostly as a source of knowledge. But this is different, because you have these small business owners like myself who have worked with large enterprises, but mostly with small businesses. And there's a know-how there. It's not knowledge, that's the know-how. And That's where the time savings comes in. And at the end of the day, the small business owner, we're not going to convince people that they need to get a master's degree in business administration or anything like that, or if they've even gone to college, right? But they can take a choice. They have a choice of many different paths they can take to reach success. And I have to say that Maggie's commitment to the series from the conception at the beginning has always been to improve the odds for small business owners to be successful. And when you look at when I started out in business decades ago, we were told that 65% of businesses will fail in the first 3 years because of these reasons.
Right.
We've improved that. It's now 65% will fail within the first decade.
Right.
So it's still
You're
a
still good.
5% failure, but now you got a decade to shift, and it might be even longer than that, because as algorithms and technology, things like AI and Internet of Things and people and all these real-time technologies, look at what we're doing today.
Right.
You know, I've been doing video conferencing since about Y2K, right? Year 2000. But 2 years ago, you tried to do a video conference with people, unless they were, you know, leading edge new media folks like yourself that were doing podcasts and video conferencing, they wouldn't touch it. Today, you've got people meeting for church online, and they're not going to go back. They're very comfortable with meeting in their living rooms. They like the idea of sitting around in their pajama bottoms, right? Which, of course, the new generations, they wear them everywhere. So it really doesn't matter, right? But
it doesn't change.
But the idea being that we are always an adaptable people, and this pandemic has really accelerated the adoption of a lot of these technologies, what I call the Jetsons kind of lifestyle. I remember the Jetsons cartoon show. That we could comfortably say we could be doing this in 20, 40 years on a regular basis. That was all accelerated to less than 20 months.
I think one of the numbers, and first of all, business will never be done the way it was done prior to the pandemic. That's a foregone conclusion. That's already done that way. But I think the other side is to think of an organization like Zoom that had 10 million customers, 10 million users in December of 19, that had 500 million users in May of 20.
I know.
The scalability, the ability to jump. That's why I think these books and your contribution is so important, because the other thing I was thinking when you were saying that is the definition of business owner has changed dramatically over the course of the pandemic. The gig economy or the side hustle is a standard today.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the so far-fetched or the outside, right? It's the right. So what it has done is it has made business owners out of people who are simply looking for a means to income, means to revenue, right?
Right. And we were marching that way slowly, right, on the gig economy. Again, an acceleration and adoption of that. The other technologies that have come together with this, besides 5G, which, by the way, for your audience, that's more than just a cell phone upgrade, folks. This is a complete radical departure from old security protocols, communication protocols that go back to World War II that our internet is based on. So we're going to see major changes in the way in which we communicate, not just in bandwidth and speed, but even in the security levels, which brings me to the second level of technology, or the second technological change in this nexus, which is blockchain. It's the basis of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. But I head up an international consortium looking at the validation and portability of HR data globally, because people before would have to get a visa, come to work here in the United States. Not anymore, right? But how do you validate that they have got the credentials they say they do? And they may not be necessarily degrees. They might be tool credentials. Do they really exist? That sort of thing. And that's been a trip, because a lot of countries are way ahead of us in terms of these kinds of programs. The United States is very good at setting standards, but very bad at applying them. And we see that every day in the compromises we see in government. But that decentralization of information is coming, which will make our personal data that much more secure. That's why we need to have tools, which one of my companies does, to actually give you the ability to say yay or nay as to who can have access to your information. Right now, it's in oblivion. You don't see it. It's completely out of view. And that's one of the significant changes we'll see in our lifetime, probably within the next 2 to 5 years.
Yeah, amazing how things are advancing. Wow. Just like this show is advancing. We work through our time here.
Yeah.
How do people get a hold of you? And just as importantly, how do people get a hold of the book and be able to support you and the app and everything along with it?
Well, the book launches officially on Wednesday, November the 10th, 2021. That's next week. And the beautiful thing of that is the electronic version, if you're Kindle or electronic device, that can be purchased on the same site as the paperback book, which is Amazon.com. You can get more information immediately and download the app. You don't, as I said, need the book in order to reach out to us as contributing authors, and that can be found at brilliantbizbook.com.
Awesome. Dennis, just really appreciate the information you shared with everybody. Appreciate your contributions in the book and the app, and look forward to doing far more in the future.
I look forward to it too, Scott. I've really enjoyed this interview. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us here today. Everybody, thanks for joining Scott Schilling Speaks. We'll see you again. God bless.